Hi everyone, this is Kyle, and I'm going back to Rachel Zegler here and the upcoming Snow White adaptation and some recent comments that have resurfaced recently from D23 of September of last year. I mean, by this point, plenty of us we've all already heard what she said about the timeless Snow White movie that Disney made back in 1937 and how it's dated and how the prince in that movie is a stalker, things like that, and how it really ticked a lot of people off. But the thing that I'm wondering here is these things that she said about the previous Snow White movie or about the original movie that Disney's making a live action adaptation for. How much of these comments are Rachel Zegler's fault and how much of it is, I don't know, PR people or whoever at Disney telling her to say these things? I'll just replay real quick some of the comments that she made that have brought her under fire. This is from D23 of September of last year, so basically a year ago.
Or that your version of Snow White is different and it's more of a 2022 version of Snow White. What did you mean by that?
I mean, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
So no Prince or a different kind of Prince?
We have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story just because, we cast a guy in the movie.
Right.
Andrew Burnap, great dude.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I think everyone's going to have their assumptions about what it's actually going to be, but it's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. And whether or not she finds love along the way is anybody's guess until 2024. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby. But it's one of those things.
So true,
it's
yeah.
an inner journey that she goes on to find her true self, and she meets a lot of people along the way that make the journey really incredible.
I know I'm almost...
Okay, I'll stop it there. Okay, so she attacked the original Snow White movie. She said it was old, outdated, or it's from 1937. She said the prince is a stalker, that sort of thing. She insulted the original Snow White that they're making a live action adaptation for, which, yeah, I mean, obviously that's not a good thing to do. Now, one thing that I always keep in mind here, one thing we have to keep in mind is Rachel Zegler, she is 22 at the moment. This was from a year ago, so she would have been 21 at the time now. Does that excuse what she's saying? No. She is an adult at this point, and yeah, you should know to be careful of things that you say. And certainly you should know that, you're making an adaptation for a timeless classic that's loved by a lot of people, and you should know that it's not really a smart idea to insult that original movie that you're going to be doing an adaptation for. But one thing that I do wonder here is, these comments that she's making, how much of this is her and how much of this is, say, I don't know, PR people at Disney or whoever, telling her to say points like this. Now, and part of the reason why I'm wondering this is because, well, a few different things. First, now these things that she's saying where essentially the old Snow White is dated, and the, new version of Snow White, it's going to be modernized. I mean, she didn't say it in exact words, but that is essentially what they're saying in this interview. Is this the first time that we've heard talking points like this? Coming from cast members making new movies or coming from, directors or executives or producers or whoever. I mean, is this the first time that we've heard, talking points like this? Like the old movie was dated, we're going to be updating it for a modern audience, essentially, is what Zegler was saying here, or the interviewer was saying. They did emphasize that Snow White's not going to be saved by a prince, it's not going to be about a love story. Is this the first time that we've heard talking points like this in interviews from actors in Hollywood, actresses in Hollywood? I mean, no, it isn't. We've heard these kinds of phrases plenty of times now. And the fact that we've heard talking points like this before, that right there, I look at it objectively, and that makes me think that someone might be encouraging her to say this. Somebody at Disney might be telling her to say these things. I mean, I don't know for sure, of course. I mean, I'm just an average person who just recently started covering entertainment here on YouTube.com. But when I look at it, the fact that we've heard a lot of these talking points plenty of times before, that makes me kind of think that, someone might be telling her to say these things. However, we go back here to Entertainment Tonight, which Entertainment Tonight released this one video here. I'm not going to play the whole thing, or I'm not going to play it, but shortly after all these comments she made a year ago resurfaced, Entertainment Weekly, they released a video of her talking about how grateful she was for the acting opportunities that she's had and whatnot, trying to portray her in a good light. And that right there implies to me that maybe she did make these comments on her own, and as a result they're doing some damage control. Boy, I tell you folks, my God, this face freaks me out right next to this video. I gotta move the mouse away. But you see that picture right next to the Rachel Zegler video. Oh my god, that freaks me out. Okay, I'm going on to a different page. I hope to never go onto this page again. Now, Bounding into Comics has a few different interviews that Rachel Zegler's given on this one page here. There's two others. I'm going to play a little bit of them. Now, the other two, she's with Gal Gadot. Gal Gadot's playing the evil queen in Snow White. Now, I'm just going to play a little excerpt of this. Okay, I'll start right here.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
Snow White is running for president.
Okay, I'll stop it there. But again, more typical talking points that we hear. Gal Gadot says that Snow White's not going to be saved by a prince. I mean, they really emphasize that she's not going to be saved by a prince. A woman being rescued by a man, that's not politically correct in today's day and age. Rachel Zegler is saying that it's not going to be about a love story. Instead, it's going to be about Snow White becoming a fearless leader or something like that. In other words, it's the typical, she's going to be a strong woman, girl boss queen, that sort of thing. Now, while the Entertainment Tonight video that right here, that implies that they might be in damage control. Oh my god, I gotta look at this again. Okay, we're leaving this page for good this time. Again, these talking points that you hear, it's not the first time that we've heard them, and that to me, that kind of makes me think that someone might be having them say these things. And one factor that no one, well, maybe a couple people have been talking about, but you don't really hear a whole lot of it. Gal Gadot here, she's essentially joining in. She's kind of making the same kind of talking points that Zegler's been making. She's talking about Snow White's not going to be saved by a prince and whatnot. I mean, you could argue that she might be egging Rachel Zegler on. I mean, that might be a factor that, I mean, I don't know if everybody's missing that, but there's definitely a lot of people that don't seem to be talking about this. She's kind of also essentially indirectly saying that the old Snow White is kind of dated and they're modernizing it. Again, it's not politically correct in the current year to have a woman be rescued by a man, so they're really emphasizing that Snow White's not going to be rescued. And look, there's nothing wrong with having a woman be saved by a man in a story. There's also nothing wrong with a man being saved by a woman in a story. Now, if you're offended by the fact that Snow White was rescued by a prince in the original Snow White movie, okay. But like it or not, that original Snow White movie, it is a classic movie that is loved by a lot of people out there. You cannot deny that for a second. And when Gal Gadot is emphasizing, she's not going to be saved by a prince, and Rachel Zegler saying, it's not going to be about a love story. I mean, they're essentially saying, we're modernizing it, we're changing it. Yeah, I mean, you are kind of insulting the original story by doing that. I mean, why would you want to change a movie that was already great and already universally loved by people to begin with? And while, again, Rachel Zegler, she is 22 years old. She was 21 at the time. Gal Gadot, I think she's 38 now. I don't know, something like that. She's approaching 40. But she is significantly older than Zegler is, and so for her, you can't really use age as an excuse with her. Now, Rachel Zegler, she has been called out by a lot of people for making comments about how the old Snow White is essentially dated and they're modernizing it. Gal Gadot, on the other hand, she has not been really called out at all by a whole lot of people. And she is arguably egging Rachel Zegler on, like in this interview that we just saw here. Now, why isn't she being called out alongside Rachel Zegler? Well, I don't know. I mean, she's not the main character. She's not playing Snow White, so maybe that's got something to do with it. So maybe the things that she's saying might go a little more unnoticed compared to what Rachel Zegler is saying. Now, there was this one video I saw from WDW Pro. I mean, I see a bunch of his videos. I mean, he's a great guy to go to. But there's one video right here where they talk about the same subject where, is Zegler saying these things on her own, or is Disney giving her some talking points to say? Now, in this video right here, there were a couple of interesting points they brought up. I mean, he had a kind of a panel of people on in this video. But there's one guy on there, Culture Casino. He made a point that, when you're at events like this, D23, I mean, these are big events where you interact with a lot of Disney fans. Yeah, they're going to be giving you some prep when it comes to interviews that you'll be giving. But there was another point that they made here, where if you look at the interview, I mean, the reporter here, when she was asking Rachel these questions about how Snow White's being updated, and then Rachel Zegler, she goes off about how, the old Snow White, it's old and outdated. I mean, the reporter essentially just completely went along with everything that she was saying. I mean, the reporter here was not at all surprised by anything that Rachel Zegler was saying at all. I mean, that's another, that to me, that's probably another little hint that maybe she was prepped to say these things. And then we have this third little interview here. It's from Entertainment Weekly. It's Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot again. I'll just play you a small little bit of this. Okay, we're going to start the video right here.
The reality is that the cartoon was made 85 years ago, and therefore it's extremely dated when it comes to the ideas of women being in roles of power and what a woman is fit for in the world. And so when we came to reimagining the actual role of Snow White, it became about the fairest of them all, meaning who is the most just and who can become a fantastic leader. And the reality is, Snow White has to learn a lot of lessons about coming into her own power before she can come into power over a kingdom.
Also, the fact that she's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's the proactive one, and she's the one who set the terms, is what makes it so relevant to where we are today.
Okay, now I don't know if this interview came before the D23 interview or not. I mean, it kind of looks like they're both wearing the exact same outfit, so maybe it's on the exact same day. But in this video here, I mean, Rachel Zegler, she's repeating really the exact same talking points. And Gal Gadot, she's repeating the exact same talking points. Rachel Zegler saying it's the original Snow White's 85 years old, 86 years old, or I forget how old she said it was, but she's saying it's dated. I mean, she's not saying verbatim the same stuff she said in her interview with this one reporter up here, but it's pretty close. And Gal Gadot, I mean, she's arguably saying almost the same stuff that she's saying right here in this interview. I mean, she's emphasizing that Snow White is not going to be saved by Prince. I mean, they're kind of repeating the same stuff here. That to me makes me think that someone at Disney, someone in PR might be telling them to say these things. But again, shortly after all these comments resurfaced, you had Entertainment Tonight putting out a video of Rachel Zegler talking about how grateful she was, trying to portray her in a more positive light, which implies that they're kind of doing damage control. I'm not going to go back to this internet page right here because right next to that video is a picture of Jennifer Lawrence, and she's making this face, and it freaks me out. I do not want to go back there. But anyway, I mean, I'm not entirely sure what to make of this. I mean, on one hand, the talking points that they're making in these interviews, I mean, let's face it. This is not the first time we've heard talking points like this before. I mean, we've heard plenty of people in Hollywood, actors, actresses, directors, producers, people like that, talk about how we're going to be remaking a story and we're going to be quote-unquote updating it for a modern audience or some paraphrase of that. We've heard the talking point before that, fill-in-the-blank female character is not going to be rescued by fill-in-the-blank male character. I mean, look, this is not the first time we've heard comments like that before coming from people working on movies. And in these few interviews here that were given here, I mean, Zegler and Gal Gadot, I mean, they're essentially repeating the same talking points, which that to me kind of implies that someone at Disney was kind of having them say those things. Yeah, I mean, I'm leaning toward somebody at Disney prepped them for these interviews. I'm not entirely sure though. Let me know what you guys think. I mean, all these comments resurfacing from Rachel Zegler, do you think that they were coming from her just on her own, or do you think that people at Disney were prepping her for these interviews from a year ago? I'm leaning towards somebody prepped them, her and Gal Gadot, but I mean, I'm not entirely sure. I'm just an average human being here on YouTube.com. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, if you consider hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care until then.